Should we get into it? Please. Okay. Your son is Percy Jackson, and you're technically Poseidon.
That's a scary thought. I'm probably the least like Poseidon of any of the gods.
I picture you as like an Aries guy.
An Aries guy, right? Yeah. The one time I tried to ride a motorcycle, it didn't go well, so I'm not.
Hi, I'm Aryan Simhadri, and I play Grover Underwood, and welcome to the Percy Jackson and the Olympians official podcast bonus episode. There's so much stuff that couldn't make it in, so let's talk to Rick.
You ready for the first question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I know, like, you've talked about how this series started as, like, you know, a bedtime story. Like, how did this all come to be? What was that first version like?
Looking back on it, it's weird that this was so long ago that, like, none of you all that are doing the show right now were alive then. Not that makes me feel, like, ancient or anything, but yeah, this was 21 years ago. No, well, actually more than that, because I was telling the story probably back in, I don't know, 2001, 2002 to my son. He's 31 now. I don't know how that happened either. But at the time, you know, it was really just me. I would tell him stories for bed. We'd read books together or whatever. And he was really having a tough time in school. He didn't like homework. He didn't like any of the subjects. I said, isn't there anything you like? Anything that we can, like, build on that you thought was interesting? He said, well, we're doing a unit on Greek mythology. That's okay. And I was like, wait, Greek mythology. I know this stuff. I've taught this before. So I started telling him stories, and he liked that. He thought that was cool. And then one night, I just kind of ran out of new myths and said, I don't know if I have any more. I mean, that's kind of it. And he said, well, why don't you make one up? And I remembered when I was an English teacher years before that, back in San Francisco, I used to do this creative writing assignment with my students where I would have them design their own demigod. And I would say, okay, come up with a name. Which god do you want as a parent? Design your adventure. What monster do you want to fight? And they would write these great short stories. So I kind of did that for him. I said, okay, I'll make up one. And I made up Percy Jackson. And it took about probably 3 nights to tell the whole story. My son is always reminding me that his version is different than the one that was published. He'll say things like, well, that's not how it happened in the original version, you know. Like, he's about as old school as you can get, even more than the books.
If you don't mind me asking, what did that original version look like? Like, was the first story that you told him, like, the story of the lightning thief? Was he always, like, named Percy Jackson?
It was the lightning thief, more or less. He went on the same adventures. He met the Minotaur first, and then Medusa.
It's a pleasure to meet you, son of Poseidon. I'm Medusa.
Percy, don't. She's a monster.
This is a very family-oriented story. Percy Jackson is a very family-oriented guy. Half the reason he does what he does is for Sally. So how did you, like, bring your family into this world?
It's really impossible for me to imagine that I would have written Percy Jackson if it wasn't for my 2 sons and Becky, my wife, because, you know, when I was writing about everything, I mean, I was drawing on that experience. I was drawing on my experience as a dad, you know, being worried about my kids. Are they going to be okay in life? You know, what kind of help are they going to need? And it always seems, when you're that age, I think, that you feel kind of like a demigod. It's just like one thing after another. It's always these huge challenges that are way too big for anybody to handle.
Uh-oh, trick ya.
Hi.
Becky has always been like my first editor, and she's always been my biggest coach in terms of encouraging me and giving me time to write. She said, I'll take the kids to the zoo today. You get a chapter done. And okay. So, you know, I'd sit down. This is back when I was teaching still. So, you know, I had to kind of find time where I could. And the kids were always my first audience. I would always read the original Percy books to them to make sure that they worked for kids. And if something I thought was hilarious that I had written didn't make them laugh, have to cross it.
Something I've always wanted to know, who originally taught you the Greek myths? Like, where did your interest from them stem from? Like, I think the fact that you were able to, like, create this whole world, I mean, basically on the fly as a bedtime story, is impressive, not only because of, like, your writing skills, but just because you had such, like, a depth of knowledge about this world. So who taught you these myths? Like, how did you fall in love with them?
I did have a fantastic 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. Past, and she taught Norse mythology and Greek mythology. And she had also done her like master's thesis on the Lord of the Rings, which was my favorite book series at that time. So I thought she was just like the greatest thing ever. And she taught me the myths. And I think she was the first teacher that like really saw me and kind of said, it's going to be okay, Rick. It gets better. It's not always going to be like you're in middle school. And it's okay to be interested in writing and reading, and you're going to do very well. Don't worry so much. And she's also the one who told me that I should be a writer. She read one of the short stories I did for her class, and she said, "This is really good. You ought to keep writing. You ought to submit this and see if you can get it published." It was rejected, but that's okay. Years and years of rejections, but she started me on the path. So I really think it's because of her that I became a middle school teacher, because she affected me so much. And then later taught mythology to my own students, which was a great way to learn it all over again. And then all of that led into Percy Jackson eventually.
That's awesome. She's kind of like your Chiron.
She is. Yeah, really is. Really is. And it was cool because she's passed now, but she was still alive when I first got a book published back in the 90s. So she did get to hear from me. I kept in touch, and she knows that, she knew that I was affected by her teaching and that it really had made a difference in my life.
What was your favorite, like, Greek myth when you first started learning about all this?
Theseus and the Minotaur, because Theseus was the son of Poseidon. And he originally was the one that I really liked because I just like the idea of your dad kind of being the second most powerful god, not the king of the world, because it just seemed like you'd have to try harder. And I also kind of liked Poseidon being sort of the underdog, like the second in command of the Olympians, and having a personality like the ocean. Like some days he could be calm and gentle and very helpful. Other days he was a typhoon, and you had to know when to avoid him. So I think that's why I like that dynamic of Poseidon, and it stuck with me with Percy Jackson.
When you first started this series, what was your game plan? Like, how did you map out what this story would become?
By the time I sat down to write The Lightning Thief, I'd actually already written like 5 novels that had been published, but they were adult private eye novels, which didn't have really anything to do with anything other than the fact that I knew how to write a plot. And it wasn't like the first time I'd sat down and tried to write dialogue and character and stuff. So that was really helpful. I knew how to plot things out. I would just do like a kind of like a flow chart with like a box for every chapter or major scene. So I'd like arrive at camp, Medusa, whatever, the sirens or whatever it was. So there wouldn't be much more than that, but at least I'd kind of know where things were going. I've learned the hard way that it's really tempting to stop after you read a couple of pages and look back and say, oh, this is horrible. I have to fix this before I move on. But if you do that, you'll never get past the beginning because it's always going to look horrible. You just have to kind of make yourself let it be horrible for a first draft. And then when you're done, you can go back and redo the whole thing. I also remember having this thought, like, wait a minute, demigods in the modern world. Am I sure nobody's ever done that before? Really? It's like, Am I just like remembering like a book I used to read? So I had to do a lot of research and make sure that the idea wasn't one I was coming up with.
That happens I talk to Walker about this a lot, and he has like vivid dreams, and he comes up to me and he's like, dude, I had this dream that this happened. Like, I think I just created a TV show. And I'm like, we talked about this in depth like a week ago. We've both seen this TV show. That's like a real thing. So I understand that. So what's been like your favorite like standout moment that you've gotten to do for this series?
I mean, honestly, working with you guys, it's been so incredible to see the cast of the TV show become the characters and elevate the characters and sort of make them your own, to the point that now, when I'm writing these new Percy books that were only written because of the show, I can't help but imagine you guys in the roles. And Grover is now you. And that makes it better. I mean, to me, when I'm writing Grover now, he is a lot more three-dimensional, and his character makes a lot more sense to me. And when I'm writing Percy, I hear Walker in my head. And that's not a bad thing, you know, because Walker is so Percy-like in real life. He's got that punchy sense of humor.
Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. Usually there's more s'mores and less ground assault.
And Leah is Annabeth, and I could just go on and on. You know, that you all have added so much to my understanding of Percy's world, that's been a huge honor, just to kind of see it go from that little story and kind of to hand it over to like this whole team of creators and talent and say, here, you know, make this world yours. And boy, have you ever.
Let's do this. Okay.
Let's make some cinema really good.
Working on this show has been like the greatest experience of my life, hands down. It's genuinely been life-changing for all of us. I remember before I got on camera, I was like talking to Dan, and I told him like I was just really nervous because every time I see you, like I feel like a little kid again, and like I feel like I do like back in season 1 whenever we first met, and I don't think that feeling is ever gonna leave me, no matter how long I work on this show. So the feeling is mutual.
I always tell people, like when fans come up with stuff, that, you know, don't worry. It's just, I mean, I'm just a middle school teacher. I'm not frightening. Well, okay, I say that, although I have had some frightening middle school teachers, like Mrs. Dodds.
Yeah.
Mrs. Dodds was the pre-algebra teacher in 6th grade, and she was a little intense, and the kids were scared of her.
You'll be needing this.
Mr. Brunner.
Tis a mighty instrument.
He was the real Latin teacher, and that's his name. He's at another school now, but he still like talks about that. And his kids will come into class apparently and say, "Mr. Brunner, a Latin teacher, are you?" And he says, yes, I'm that Mr. Brunner.
Oh my God, I would never stop talking about that. Like, that's so cool. Is there one change from the books that got incorporated into the show that you are like really proud of? Like that you think improved the story from, you know, its first draft? Something that you weren't able to do in a book, but you can do because it's TV.
Yeah, for sure. I can't take credit for it, but I think the team did a lot of great changes because you can get out of that first person voice. So that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because you can step outside of Percy's view and see what's happening when he's not around. I mean, one of the things, I think we can say this from season 2 that I love is Grover's story, because we get to be with Grover more, and he's got that like cool Indiana Jones moment right at the beginning.
Yeah, he does. It's awesome.
Yeah, but then, you know, you see what he's up to, you know, the whole way through the season. We can cut away to Grover and, okay, how's he trying to get out of his dilemma? You know, what's going on and how is he problem solving? And I'll tell you what, Grover is a lot more than just a pretty wedding dress. He is a real hero.
Nice dress.
It was a beautiful moment for me to get to wear that. It was like genuinely a dream come true. I want you to know that. That was like insane. But speaking of adapting season 2, book 2 is kind of like a modern day retelling of the Odyssey. In prep, we all like went through it, and there's so many moments that match up. how did you take some of those myths and fit them into the context of the Percy Jackson world?
Back in the 70s, everybody was talking about the Bermuda Triangle, and there were documentaries and books about it. What is it? Is it aliens? Is there a sea monster? Is it like a natural phenomenon? So it just made total sense to me that the Bermuda Triangle would turn into the Sea of Monsters in the modern world.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, the nautical adventure, I just love that. I love the sailing of the ironclad through Scylla and Charybdis, which, by the way, the show just knocked it out of the park. It's such a cool scene.
It's insane. And another like huge part of season 2 is Thalia being trapped in the trees. Which is kind of like a blend of a ton of different myths, but I'm pretty sure like primarily it's based off of Daphne and Apollo's story. How did that like idea come to be?
Yeah, I always felt bad for Daphne. I mean, I don't know what, the backstory was there, but to be like victimized and have to run away from this lovesick god who has so much more power than you, and you call on help from the other gods, and the best they can do for you is turn you into a tree? Like, really? And so I kind of played with that idea. Thalia is a pretty tough character, and the way that season 2 kind of does her story is really nice. There's a lot of nuance and depth that, again, wasn't there really in the book, but because we can be more three-dimensional about the storytelling, I think it hits a lot harder.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that scene up on the hill is brutal. And then all of us coming back up the next day to see the tree standing there is one of my most vivid memories of filming. It still makes me, like, really upset to think about it. This is a bit of a hard pivot. You were involved in pretty much every part of the casting process of the show, and you still are, thankfully for us. How did you decide that we were all going to be who we were going to be? Was it imagining, like, our voices in the books? Was it a chemistry thing? Like, what was the process of forming this incredible cast?
I can't take credit for that. I was certainly involved, and I'm certainly very, very happy with everything as it turned out. But, I mean, it really was, like everything in TV, very much a team effort with a lot of people weighing in, a lot of ideas. But I think what helped is that we kind of had a synchronicity around what we were looking for. And it wasn't so much about like, well, it says Percy has black hair in the books, therefore it's essential to his character that he has black hair. I don't care. I want to hear his voice. That's Percy, because I've lived with Percy's voice for 20 years now, and I know what he sounds like. And I know it when I hear it. And Walker is Percy. And it's the same with the other characters. It's like who embodies their spirit, who embodies like what makes them a person. I remember, for instance, Leah. I mean, Leah, the first time I met her was at a chemistry read, and she walked up to me and she knew who I was, but she was not impressed. She just came up and said, "Hey, Rick, how you doing? So I have some questions about this character. So tell me about Annabeth's relationship to Athena." And I'm like, wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So she's already thinking strategically. I mean, she has a warm side to her, of course, but she also has this really sort of warrior analytic side to her too that you don't necessarily see at the very first, but I could totally see like the gears working. And she also is really great about self-reflecting, which is something I think Annabeth does. Like I remember in that very first chemistry read, she was not afraid to like stop the director and say, "Okay, hold on. How do you want me to say this line? Or could you explain, when you say you want me to do it this way, can you tell me a little bit more about that?" And I thought, wow, here's a 12-year-old girl, and she is talking to all these, powerful TV people like they're her peers. And we're just trying to get this great product made. And she understood that. She was a real professional. So I saw Annabeth in her. And Grover's all about heart and humor and sympathy and somebody you'd want to have as your best friend. And I could totally see you in that role. And, I could just go on and on. But it was the personality, the energy of every actor that was additive to who the characters were.
Speaking of, like, you know, inspiration for all of these characters, Percy is obviously inspired a little bit by Perseus and a little bit by all of the sons of Poseidon, like Theseus. But who or what inspired Annabeth and Grover? I mean, a satyr, a child of Athena, and a child of Poseidon is a pretty unusual combination.
It is. I always have thought the nature spirits of the Greek world were really, really interesting. And especially the satyrs, you know, they get kind of a bad rep in mythology as being sort of crazy party animals. But I think they're more than that. I mean, they're sort of the heartbeat of the world. You know, they are in touch with the natural world, but they're also part of the human world. They're kind of a bridge. And so it made sense to me that Grover would be an empath and he would be the one to guide you. You might not look at Grover at first and say, oh, wow, this guy's a hero and he's going to save the world. But, you know, don't underestimate him. He has a lot more to him than you might think at first. And I think that's true of all the characters. The relationship that develops between Percy and Annabeth, which hopefully is not a spoiler if anybody's read the books.
I never said boyfriend.
Okay,
I didn't.
I believe you.
That's based on me and my wife. Becky is absolutely my Annabeth. We have been together since we were 16. And, you know, she has been with me the whole time, put up with me the whole time, even in my most boneheaded Percy Jackson moments. So when I'm talking about those two as a team, I'm really talking about me and Becky. I'm going back to the time when we were teenagers, and I remember that very well. If you are going on any kind of quest, you'd want a child of Athena, somebody wise and brave and able to see the big picture.
Yeah, it's kind of the perfect counterbalance for Percy.
Yeah, who is only some of those things.
At times. I've always found Annabeth's power of invisibility very interesting, especially for someone so headstrong and unafraid to speak up for herself. Did it originate from the myth of Athena lending that cap of invisibility or the helm of darkness to Perseus?
Well spotted. That's exactly where it came from. The helm of darkness, you know, it's a motif. You get this gift from the gods and you're thinking, thanks? You know, what are you telling me, Mom? Like, here, be invisible, go away. Is that the message? You know, when the best gift you can give me is an invisibility hat. So I think, although Annabeth appreciates the hat, I do think inside she's probably questioning, like, why is this the thing I got? You know, it's like, why do I fight with a dagger? He gets a sword and all I get is a dagger. What's that about?
Yeah.
But I think really, you know, at the end of the day, what Annabeth comes to realize is that it's not about the magic presence. It's about the mind. It's about, that's her secret. That's her superpower.
Out of all of the powers that all of the demigods in the book have, I would say invisibility is easily the most versatile. And I think that makes perfect sense for why it fits her so well.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, we're gonna move on now. We reached out to some of our friends who we've spoken with before, and it would feel wrong to do an official podcast to the show without consulting the experts. So we consulted all of our podcast officials who have been with the show since the start, Newest Olympian, Seaweed Brain, Monster Donuts, and they got back to us with some genuinely incredible questions. Like, I wish we could just spend a day on all of these because they're brilliant. We'll start with Mike from the Newest Olympian. For the show, the empathy link between Grover and Percy forms organically because of how close friends they are. In the book, Grover essentially opens this empathy link without really telling Percy, but gives him the option to shut it down at the end, and he declines. That's one of my favorite changes in the book, or in the show. But what inspired this change? Was it a change that you had kind of been stewing up, or did it just come to you on the fly? Was the empathy link drawn from any particular mythos?
As far as I recall, the empathy link wasn't from mythology. I think, if I'm being honest, I'm a Star Trek fan, and when I was a kid, I probably had Spock and Kirk in my head more than that.
Yeah.
Boom! Empathy link! Has to be!
Does it? What is that?
It's a bond. A telepathic, empathic bond between a satyr and a demigod that can cut through time, space, and dreams.
I'm not sure Grover doing an empathy link without asking consent is really cool.
This is happening now, and if I die, you die.
That's right. Yeah. So that said, I think that was a very sensible and good change, that it was just something that happened rather than something that, by the way, I just happened to do this. Sorry.
I like how it's like a surprise for both of them. Like they're just both stoked about it, and they both know why it's happening.
This is so cool. Yeah.
Their next question, and a question I've always had about the books, what is Backbiter's backstory? Narrator Percy describes it in The Sea of Monsters. He says this: I could almost feel the blades fighting against itself, like two opposing magnets bound together. I don't know how the blade had been made, but I sense a tragedy. Someone had died in the process. What is that story? Is there a story for it?
I have never written the details of that story, but I think, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it does kind of speak to this kind of uneasy binding between mortals and gods. And that's basically what being a demigod is. It's like having two different parts of yourself that don't really fit together. What is Luke about here? He's got this blade that kind of represents his conflict. He's doing what he thinks is right, but he's also got Cronus in his head. So how much of it is really him? And I think the sword is kind of meant to represent that.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, I love Riptide. I've always thought Backbiter was the coolest thing from the books, especially because it tees up Luke's journey so well. All right, from Seaweed Brain, from Erica and Carter, do you think Luke picked the name Princess Andromeda as a subtle dig at Percy? And I actually didn't even know the myth behind Andromeda until I saw this question come in from them. And that's genius.
I don't remember that being something I thought, oh, Perseus, Andromeda. Oh, I just liked the image of the masthead. In the book, it's described as, it's the chained princess. And what does that mean? And what kind of message is that sending? I think maybe Luke is saying, we demigods have been chained to our destiny by the gods, and they've asked us to do these sort of quests and over and over again, and we're just repeating ourselves for their amusement, and we need to break those chains. So I think that may be why he chose the name.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's a big fandom discussion topic that perhaps Annabeth's fatal flaw isn't truly hubris, but rather perfectionism. Not the belief that she is the smartest in the room, but rather a fatal drive to constantly prove herself to be the smartest so she can earn her mother's love. In your mind, are hubris and perfectionism the same thing? Where does Annabeth stand on that line?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would just be, like the fans, I would just be speculating. Annabeth, I think, would like to have everything under control. She wants to understand all the variables. She wants to have a plan, and then she wants to have a backup plan, and then a backup plan, so that whatever happens, she's prepared. Now, is that the same thing as being a perfectionist? I don't know. I mean, maybe they overlap a little bit. And I think the point about her wanting to please her mom, that's definitely true. I think that's something a lot of demigods have to deal with. To what extent are you pleasing your parent? And to what extent are you pushing back on them and letting yourself be your own person?
Interesting. Yeah, how much of it is you just have to do the right thing and be the hero, and how much of it is, okay, I know that, but I'm just doing it so they see me. Up next, from Monster Donuts, Emily and Phoebe, thank you. In this season, we get to see the introduction of a character original to the TV series, Allison Sims, which is kind of the most we've explored with the dynamics within the Titan army. So how did Allison come about? What is it about her character that makes her a good counterpoint to Luke in your mind? Why does Luke need a counterpoint?
I think it makes sense in the context of that kind of three-dimensional storytelling we were talking about earlier, in that you are able in the TV show to be with Luke and his team in a way that you simply can't do if you're in Percy's head the entire time. And so we don't really know very much about the conversations that Luke had with his team. when we weren't there in the books, but now we do. So it just made sense. Well, he would have lieutenants, he would have other people on his team, he would have conversations, probably disagreements. What brought those demigods to the fight with Cronus? What convinced them that this was the right way to go? And do they agree with everything that Luke says? So Allison was kind of a foil for Luke in the same way that Percy's friends are a foil for him.
They are kind of like a parallel almost for Percy and Thalia. Like, Kronos manipulated Percy and Thalia into vying for this child of prophecy role. And Kronos probably manipulated Allison into this position of power so that way he can almost like better Luke by having him compete against someone, like prove his worth.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful to have like, sort of a single point of reference for that, and Allison serves that purpose.
It will be done.
Their second question is, you are simultaneously writing versions of Percy, Annabeth, and Grover that are, very early into their journey in the show, but you're also writing a version of them much later into their journey in the senior year trilogy. Do you feel those two versions informing each other? How do you keep them separate, and how do you use the fact that they're sharing space in your brain right now to your advantage?
I think there's a lot of creative energy that comes from what you all are doing on set that is really helpful to me, and that kind of feeds my own creativity, and we get this nice sort of feedback loop with the stuff that you're doing, making me think, oh yeah, that's an interesting idea. I like that dynamic, or I like sort of the way these characters are interacting. And in terms of the difference, yeah, I mean, these are stories about the characters when they were much younger. In book terms, it hasn't been that long. And in book terms, Percy is, 14, 15 now? In the senior year, he's not even 18 yet. So weirdly, even though I've been writing about him for 20 years, he's only advanced like 2 years in age.
Perpetually 18 for the rest of his life.
I know. Maybe someday, he'll be able to vote. I don't know.
Move to New Rome.
There you go.
I'm sorry, I have one more question for you. We've all spent a lot of time with Percy Jackson, and he's great. I love him. He's whatever. But I think it's time we see some more of other characters, When is Grover Underwood and the Olympians gonna come out?
I was wondering if you had any particular character in mind. Grover Underwood.
Off the top of my dome, I haven't really been thinking about it for too long.
I would love to see a spin-off show of some kind with Grover at the center. Wouldn't that be cool? I mean, he could, who knows how many adventures he had on his way to trying to find Pan. I'd love to see that. I'd watch it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being here. There was a lot of material, so thank you for that. Watch and listen to the Percy Jackson and the Olympians official podcast, available on Disney Plus and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't miss Percy Jackson and the Olympians, now streaming on Disney Plus.